think I've always written, and um, especially when I was younger, I just love that feeling of being immersed in fiction, in stories. And um, always had a book, went to the library a lot. So that was a big thing. And then I think I started writing, writing essays for schools, but always wanting to go to that place. I was working on a radio show with Eamon Dunphy and I was doing sketches, and that just started accidentally. And there was a kind of good discipline to that because you have to just, it wasn't the day job. So you just writing, every day. And there was a kind of itch there. And I remember being on a bumpy Ryanair flight and realizing, or thinking, it's going to crash. It wasn't, obviously, but, and thinking, I had this idea for something that was a play, really, that I did write, a play called Defender of the Faith. And I thought, what are the things that I haven't done? And I thought this one kind of story idea that I wanted to do, and I wish I had done that. And then I think I just wanted to commit totally to it. And I remember, when I was young, in college, you go to Grogan's pub and there'd be a lot of people and every second person's into writing something. And I wanted to really apply it. So I gave up the day job. I mean, I ended up having to take other jobs along the way before writing really took off, but I wanted to do this. So I came back on a bank holiday Monday, came back on Tuesday, gave my notice, left on Friday. And then I sat down and I thought and I had a few rules for myself. So I'm not going to meet people for lunch. I'm going to be at a desk from 9 to 5. No matter what, I'm at that desk. I'm not gonna be in the pub, so I'm not gonna be drinking. I'm not gonna be talking about it, and I'm gonna get it done. And then the first week was fine, but it was a bit terrifying because, I wanted to do a play. It wasn't that I burning desire to do a play. I thought a play was more likely to be made. So I had studied it, bought a lot of plays, looked how structure works. So that was my rule. I sat down roughly from 9 to 5, and so I was sitting there in front of a blank page for a few hours and nothing happened. And then what I allowed myself to do in the afternoon was read plays and just look at structure. So you might read a play and study it from different points of view. So you look at it from the point of view of story, you look at it from the point of view of character A, character B. So you might read the same thing 20 times. There was no hard and fast rules. And then I think the second week was really interesting because it just suddenly opened up, and I think it was the discipline of was sitting there saying, no matter what, I'm not going to talk about this. I want to just get this done. And it's a similar process for everything I've written. You can slightly visualize it in different ways, but I visualize it as it's like a forest clearing, and there's nothing on the floor, and then this one little snowdrop comes up, and then because you're staring at it going, like nothing will ever come, and then this one, and it's an image. Sometimes it's a dialogue, and that's your key to open up the world. And then suddenly what's kind of great then is time seems to pass by really quickly, and you suddenly realize, hours have gone by and I've been in my head.
Yeah.
And all of this, this world is opening up. And then that came very quickly. Then it came within about 5 days as a first draft. It was when that happened, it was great because it was almost like sort of surfing or
catching the wave.
Yeah, you catch the wave, and it's so freeing. And then I do think for the first time, I did a couple of plays. I wrote a book that didn't get published. I wrote a lot of different stuff. But I think maybe for the first few years, I was a pretend writer in the sense of I wrote, but I didn't enjoy it in that deep way. So one of the things happens with a play is that, you're there and you go into rehearsals, and then so rehearsals are coming up, or the play goes on. So you've got previews. Afterwards, you go to pub with the actors and you say, "Oh, you're so great." And they say, "Oh, the writing is so good." And then opening night's great night. And then you go, "I'll check in with you a week later." And then you come along and then you have the same conversation. "Oh, you were so good." And yeah, but the writing in it feels not very nourishing. It feels like going back to McDonald's because you're not getting any creative energy from that because it's old, it's already done. And so you're pretending to be a writer. So you have the externals of that's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to go to rehearsals, but you're not doing something new. And so I remember writing a few different pieces in that way where you're writing, but it's not a struggle, but it feels that you're aware that I am writing now and I'm doing something, but you're not surfing. And in moments where you're surfing, and then I think the discipline really helped. So there was, because I said, I really want to do this. And so a lot of it was really not socializing, and you go into this interior world. And so the first few things you write, you want to be able to go out and say, yeah, guess what I was writing, or I'm doing this. And I felt that the true type of writing that took a few years to get into was actually you long to be in that space. So if you go on holidays and you don't bring your laptop with you, you feel a type of anxiety. And maybe it's like sea swimming or something, but it's that freedom. So that's what I do. I do love, sometimes I'm always working on a half a dozen things. And when it goes well, it is like, it does feel like it's like swimming or surfing. And so I noticed over the years that it's similar patterns. There's an anxiety at the beginning. And then if you're able to surf the wave, it's very rewarding.
Do you think that it's beneficial to have multiple projects on the go at the same time? Because I think for me, I often find that by bouncing between things, I can sort of quicken my problem solving process.
Yeah.
Because if I get blocked in one thing, I don't have to dwell over it. I can move on to something else. And sometimes when I crack something there, I can return to that block with like a new energy or perspective that allows me to push forward. Is that similar for you, or?
Yes, I think that's true, and also not true in the sense that I think that sometimes you to really concentrate, you need to concentrate on one thing very well, and it can be distracting and hard if you're trying to. I think it's like your unconscious mind that works. I think the last thing you're doing is at a typewriter for me. I think you're walking around, and there's different moments, and it is like that, it is moments where you see like with the ones bluebell or snowdrop pops up, and then suddenly there's this rush. And so I find sometimes it is the same process all the time. There's a rush of energy, and when the rush of energy comes, you don't have time for other things. And if your mind isn't concentrating on a few things, it's very hard for that energy to come. So you can juggle 5 or 6 times, and it's quite useful in a carpentry sense.
Yeah.
You learn from each project, you learn from other people's work. All of that is good, but I do think at the same time you need an intense focus on that one thing.
And just talking about those initial glimmers when ideas first take root and you feel that rush of inspiration, as you say, could you look at all your various projects and pinpoint a very evident beginning for all of them, or are those moments sort of less defined?
I think generally there is a starting point, an image, piece of dialogue or something that opens up the door. And then I don't know. I mean, sometimes I find, because I've written so much, and then a lot of stuff, doesn't get made. But yeah, I think in general, I think it's really important. I think it's like it's the foundations we're building. Like, so I think if you get that right, it works. And sometimes things haven't worked because maybe that's the answer to the question. Sometimes you haven't had that. You're trying to construct something and it's not real. So you're constructing it, but you don't have that initial, let's say, magic key that opens the world. And so it never really quite works. You like sometimes the limitations is good because you're asked to write certain things, or you're always pitching. There's no guarantee it'll get made, so you're doing different things. Certain things, it's not always that you're going, especially in the world of TV, you're not going, this is the dream thing I want to. Somebody wants something in a particular area, and so you have to find. So you're trying to find a way in, and then make it connect with you somehow.
Yeah. And that sort of speaks to the discipline you mentioned earlier, like really focusing on the work and just showing up feels more accessible to me than maybe needing every project or idea to like immediately and deeply resonate with my own sensibilities or whatever.
I agree. I think the more you work at something and the more you lock in, the easier it is. And yeah, I think there's a thing. It's like a physical discipline. So
Yeah.
So at least there's a satisfaction that I'm locked in.
Sure. And do you find that is similar with the other aspects of your work beyond writing, like with the production side of things? Is that a necessary evil for you, or do you find that just as engaging?
Oh no, I mean, I love the other side of stuff. It's quite a nice balance, because I imagine being a novelist is quite lonely, but it's quite good because making TV shows is like it's joining the circus for a while. And even in development, you're meeting and you're shooting the breeze and you're hooking up, and I think it's good because it is like the circus, and so there's different personalities each time. So it's not that you know, every time you're there, you know, you like the bearded lady or the strong man. But you go into a new circus, and when it's correct, or when the energies are similar, it can be hugely productive.
Right.
So if you find, you know, a producer, a director, or an actor, or you know, I at this point would have, there's loads of people that I would,
You know, you have that connection with, like that.
yeah,
connection with a
I would like I have a great friend, Maureen Hughes, is a casting director, and I'll talk to her a lot about stuff, and she's just brilliant sense of actors, and she'll mention somebody, and you might start thinking about that person in a particular role. And I think I think it's nice. It's a creative energy, and you can feed off other people's creativity, and
It's kind of like the collaborative version of catching the wave, I suppose.
yeah.
And it makes sense why so many artists work consistently with the same people or the same circus, as you say, because there's a certain faith maybe or safe feeling in taking an idea to its next stage.
I think you do both. Like, I think it's really good to have people that you trust and rely on and have a shorthand with.
Right.
But I also think it's really important to look for new energies all the time. I mean that in terms of life. You know, every single day is an opportunity to meet somebody new, right? A new energy, a new person. And I think creatively it's the same. It's the same thing. That suddenly, you know, you can meet a person who's creative, and they open a whole other universe to you. You're doing stuff that you mightn't have thought you was possible the year before. You're introduced to suddenly a new 20 people, and it's a whole adventure.
Right.
And that's kind of wonderful when that happens. It's just, and so it's really important just to keep open to that. And so there's a kind of fine line. I would say, like, I used to have this thing, say yes. Now I try and say no, because you get dragged out. Sometimes you can say yes too many times, where you're, especially with new projects, and you end up, you suddenly will go in a year, if you take 20 or 30 meetings about a project, it might be 20 or 30 books or an IP that you have to read, or you're meeting producers or different people, or have a few things, and then you have to have thoughts, and it's hugely time consuming. And often, and sometimes when you're looking at it, you go, okay, I'm not particularly interested, but the producer's really good, or the director's really good, so yeah, fuck it, I'll do it. And so I would have had that approach. Like real hustler, I'll go wherever I can go, and I won't. So now I try and conserve my energy a bit more, where I find that it can be quite exhausting, and disheartening, because you spend all your time doing that, and you're longing to get back to the desk. Really, what you really want is somebody to say, "I'll pay you to do that, and then we'll make it the way you want it."
The dreams.
Yeah, that only comes around once in a while, and the stars have to align a little bit, and you have to accept it's beyond your control to some degree.
Yeah. And I think that's also a relief in some sense, because the pressure is lessened for like the project to be perfect.
Yeah, it's always about the next thing. So I remember doing my second play with Gary Hines and Druid, and I think, like, she was doing the previews, and it's almost during the previews she was on her next project already, and I remember thinking, that's interesting, and going, and now I understand it. I was able to observe it without getting it. You imagine, like, it's an actor, and they've just done something. They're not sitting around looking at the film that they've just made.
Yeah.
They're onto the second project, third project, and so it's that I think that's the same thing with writing. You're looking for not what you've done, but what you're just about to do.
The forward momentum of it all, I suppose.
Yeah.
And surely that's a key way to get better at your craft, you know, not to dwell on something, but to keep moving.
Well, it was interesting because we were talking before about the Rick Rubin book, and he was talking about this, the danger of saving something. So you have a good, and I think he was talking about writing or music, where you've got something that's good, and so you save it. So instead of letting it out in this current project, you think, well, the current project isn't the right project for it. I'm going to wait until I'm playing in a bigger arena, or there's more chance of this being successful.
Yeah.
And what was interesting about reading that is, he said that kills your energy.
Yeah.
Because what you're there is you're relying on that little something that you've come up with, and you think, I'll hold on to this because I'm scared in case I won't get it again. He says, you find something, you use it, you throw it away, and that opens the door to the next beat, the next one, the next one, the next one. You have to it has to be disposable. You have to move on quickly. And I thought that was something I guess I recognized in the book. I thought that's true.
Yeah, I think, and the only way to sort of overcome that, at least for me, has been just doing it repeatedly to sort of get over that fear, or maybe again, like a lack of faith, like you say, that
Yeah.
I won't have another idea as good as this one right now, which seems ridiculous. But it's sort of, you need that repetitive action to build confidence, I suppose, and then you can become disposable with it and let ideas go as quick as they come. You know what I mean?
I think disposable is good. I remember seeing Jez Butterworth's play Jerusalem in London a few years ago. That was pretty amazing. And Mark Rylance was in it, the character Johnny Rooster, I think was the character. And it was like really astonishing play. Really moved you. And that might happen to you, 5, 6, 7, 8 times in your life, where you just see like such a piece of work or a performance. I came out onto the street, and it takes a while. You're just it's like you've gone 10 rounds in a ring, And what I loved about it was there were jokes in it about Girls Aloud or something, but they were pop culture references that would lose their significance a year later, 2 years later, 5 years later.
Right.
So he was writing in the moment. He wasn't writing for posterity. He didn't have that dead hand of he's aware of that he's writing something serious. He just captured a moment in time, and I quite love that sense of it's disposable.
Right. Because a lot of the time I feel like films or like art in any medium can come out and feel so relevant to the current moment, but have been made years ago. Like there's a certain timelessness with certain things, I think. And
Yeah.
if the whole thing is hanging off contemporary references, then maybe that wouldn't work. But if they're just adding texture to the world without, demanding you to fully understand them, then maybe there's a balance there or something.
I like watching stuff where things aren't over explained. It can be challenging sometimes with TV because you've got an industry around it. And I always think there is a pressure, I guess, more so on TV where to over explain. So you have to be really strong against the take of the industry. There's a pressure, and I think I read this book. Al Alvarez's critic years ago talked about the important thing is the voice. So you take certain things for granted that, it's like if you're a carpenter or a plumber, you can have a craft, but a lot of it is about, there's elements like subtext or, there was a bit where I recognize it in good scripts where it's just got some other quality, and that can become difficult with people saying like, is that clear or is that? I read there was a famous thing. I mean, that's part of the job, really. Is just to navigate that, not to moan about it, just to navigate it. It's like I remember hearing the best story I heard about that was I can't remember the guy's name. He was a drama commissioning editor in BBC years ago, but they were telling this the crucifixion story, the Passion of the Christ story, and setting it in Liverpool, modern day setting, and it was a big thing. And I read into, he did say this, the guy, the commissioner, and his note was, he said, well, like, so just for an audience who don't know this story, what's at stake? I thought that couldn't be true. And I then read an interview where he was asked about that, and he said, yes, I was just pointing that out. And I think that maybe is the most, let's say, egregious example.
Yeah.
And I think it's part of the job is, like, the Americans always talk about, like, it's kind of slightly nauseating, but there's the note behind the note. So it's quite feudal in a way, right? So so there's a load of people in the business, kind of execs, and they're terrified of losing their jobs. So they're quite well paid, but they've got credit cards and they've got cars, and it's about keeping up with the Joneses. And so their job is not to look at a script and say, yes, I like this, or I don't like this, or that doesn't make sense. It's to agree with their boss, because if their boss moves up, they'll move up. And if they contradict their boss, they might be out. And suddenly you've got a credit card debt, you got no health insurance, and you got a problem.
Yeah.
So I found sometimes that could be challenging to navigate. So there are all these expressions that have, the note behind the note. And that means I haven't been able to articulate what's wrong with your script, but I'm right. And so you have to respond accordingly. It's like half your job there is to be a kind of,
the art of like taking a note without actually changing anything.
yes,
Like,
and sometimes they're right, and it's a kind of weird it's a weird place to be, because it's not about not having an ego in it. It's an inexact science. So there's a bit of it where you just have an instinct that something is right, and it's hard to explain. And sometimes you can get over noted to death. So sometimes you'll have a script, and you might have 10 people giving you different notes, and it might just be, can I add this, or I'm not sure I understand that, and is that clear? Would it help if we did this? And you want to say, fuck off.
Right.
But you say, sure, yeah. And so you might have a tight, let's say you'll have a script that's pretty tight, and then suddenly at the end of it, you'll go, what was 5 pages is now 12 pages. And then everybody's sitting around and going, maybe it's just feeling a little bit slow and maybe a little bit baggy. And, and then when they want to suggest cuts, they're suggesting not cutting the lines that they suggested, but your existing lines. So then you end up with that, whatever the expression is about a camel designed by committee or whatever it is.
But do you think there's something strange where if it is someone's job to give a writer notes, then wouldn't they feel sort of obligated to do that, even if the script doesn't call for it?
Yeah, I find it hard sometimes to wonder, if somebody has never written, has never directed, and has never produced, and they're suddenly a junior exec, and then they're a mid-level exec, and then their job is to, and I think, I don't think you get, I think anybody can have an opinion because we all watch TV and films, but I don't know if you're a plumber, you'd get that, have you thought about putting the U-bend in a different way,
Yeah, it's like that quote, which I'm sure you're familiar with, which is like, anyone can tell there's something wrong with your script, but it's only the writer who can really fix it.
Yeah. I think what becomes really important is that if you've got you can have really good execs and you can have really good creative producers around you. And you can have a director that you're on the same wavelength as. And sometimes it's not necessarily that you're right and they're wrong. It's just about being on the same wavelength. And the difficulty with, let's say, execs is let's say that, so, people talk about the Netflix algorithm or, which is challenging, but it's not so much that it's that I think once people have a bit of success, they're trusted more. Like a friend who worked a lot in Britain, and he said, the problem is, he said, a lot of the really good writers, up and coming young writers, get over noted, and he said some of the really established ones actually need notes,
Yeah.
but nobody's going to give them those notes. But it's always been that way, and that's just something, that's the kind of reality. And there's different ways of navigating it, and there's no particular perfect way of navigating it. I've tried everything. I've tried being accommodating. I've tried telling people to go fuck off, or I've tried, every version of it. And I think once you accept you're in that place with people and people mean well, then part of your job is to persuade them that that what you're saying is right, or that you have a solution, or that a solution that suits them. But it can get very messy, and that's why if you, like I think I was talking to you before about the Frank Zappa thing.
Yeah.
He famously said, he loved those old school, like cigar chomping execs who didn't know, said, I don't understand what you people are doing, but, I don't get this music. And he said, and he loved those kind of guys. So they didn't pretend they get it. They just recognize that you're doing something and it seems to work. And I'm not going to get into the weeds with you on it. And then suddenly he said, all the ex-hippies were cut their hair and they were taken over, and they had opinions and they were saying, well, you can't do this, you can't do this. And I think there's a truth there somewhere that it's that I certainly always like those type of people better. The kind of straight up, no bullshit, hard, being really practical in terms of things like casting, or who's this for? Where are we going to get this made?
Yeah.
And also those kind of people can sometimes have a sensitivity. The brash people can have a sensitivity that you don't expect, and they're smart. So there's no hard and fast rules. It's sometimes it's difficult where, on certain things you might find that 60% of your energy goes on that.
Yeah, because I feel like it's such an interesting system. I mean, surely it's actually beneficial to divide the jobs and trust people to deliver from their own space of expertise or something.
I mean, I'm saying that, and I also don't agree with it at the same time.
Right.
So I think that, for example, if you look at something like Raging Bull, where between De Niro and Scorsese and Paul Schrader, they were trying to figure stuff out. And also, Thelma Schumacher, the editor he works with all the time, has a huge input there. But if you read about that, I went to a masterclass that Thelma Schumacher did, it was like 20 years ago. But she was saying halfway through the filming of that, everybody lost confidence in it. So all his famous Pressburger Powell type shots, the crew didn't get it, they didn't understand this. But when they're coming to the end of it, I think Paul Schrader, was like he's talking to, saying what's a character, what's he doing at the end, and he had some notion, like, I don't know if I got this right or not, but it was like he's looking at himself in the mirror and he's masturbating or something, De Niro says, I'm not fucking doing that, like. And then De Niro was the person who came up with on the Waterford speech. So there's there's in that case, the writer's not necessarily right, the actor's finding a way, but they're collectively trying to find a way. There's another one I think about, which is it's the Thomas Harris. So if you look at Silence of the Lambs, is a perfect book, it's an amazing screenplay, and it's a brilliant film. So like an interesting exercise, I've done it a few times, is to study all three of them. So you read the book, see what the changes are from the book to the screenplay, and then see the changes from the screenplay to the movie, and the choices are all kind of correct. Then you look at the other one, Hannibal, Ridley Scott directed. So, and it wasn't a particularly good film, but Hannibal Lecter is a fantastic creation. So in terms of the first film, if that hadn't been a best-selling book, there's no way that would have been done as a screenplay.
Right.
So here's this guy, he's a cannibal. And at one point, I think, if you remember, he's in some kind of hall, and there's two guards there, and he basically takes their faces off them. And
Right, Silence of the Lambs.
Silence of the Lambs.
Yeah.
And you would have, so somebody's writing a screenplay, you would go, we're just beginning to like the guy. Is that necessary? Does he need to actually cut his face off and put it on him? Is there a different way he can get out? Because we just begin to like him. So because it's appalling and barbaric, and there's something just so weird and strange about Thomas Harris' imagination. And so it's come from this strange place. And so because it's that, it gets made, and it's true to the book. However, in the book, the other book he did, Hannibal, what happens is at the end of that, there is it's from the position of Barney, who's the orderly in the prison, and so his voice comes up, as far as I remember, and it cuts to he is at the opera in Rio de Janeiro, someplace, and he feels eyes on him, and he turns over his opera glasses, and he sees Hannibal and Clarice. They nod at each other, and then he looks away, keeps looking at the opera, and 20 minutes later, he looks over the opera box, and Hannibal and Clarice have left. And he goes, he knew whenever Hannibal is this certain type of person, so he's not going to come after him. So Thomas Harris, who created the character in that book, he has Hannibal Lecter and Clarice go off into the sunset together as a romantic couple. Right? So they're coming to make the film. And in the film, what happens is this, and again, it's not a particularly good film, but the cops are on the way. Clarice handcuffs herself to Hannibal. He takes up a big meat cleaver and goes, oh, put me in a dilemma. What are we going to do? Comes down, she winces, and then he cut to you're on a plane, and there's the little boy saying, what's that? And he cut to Hannibal is sitting beside him, and he has a little Dean and DeLuca box of gourmet food, including brains and fancy food. And he goes, what's that? And he goes, oh, it's sweetbreads or brains or something. And you realize he's wearing a sling, so he's chopped off his hand. So he's chopped out of his hand for love for Clarice. Yeah. And somehow, in a bad film, or not particularly good film, they have the correct ending. So that means that Thomas Harris didn't have the right ending. It's kind of unbelievable that Clarice would go off into the sunset with Hannibal. So what I thought was interesting about that idea is that you can be a writer, and you can be a brilliant writer like Thomas Harris, and you can do something wrong, and the film somehow gets the better ending.
Yeah, it's again like the point of collaboration and the benefit of filtering the story through another mind, especially someone who's dead set on making the best version of the idea is Ridley Scott,
Yeah.
But just on the Raging Bull thing as well, I think in that example, all those people collaborating are all at the creative end of it, whether it be Scorsese, De Niro, Schrader, Thelma Schumacher, and that makes sense to me, those jobs merging. But it's at the business end of it where those kinds of jobs merge with the creative. That feels like that's not conducive to making the best thing or something, and that's where it can get messy.
I think there's always waves. I think it's, you've got disco and bell bottoms, and then it's followed by punk. So I think that if you look at, those books about the history of Hollywood, you'll see similar patterns where you will see a certain type of filmmaking, and then suddenly all the classic movies of the 70s come out, and then they last a while, and then suddenly you've got the kind of Spielberg, Star Wars, Jaws, all those things. And so everything feels like it comes in waves. And so, at the moment, there's some amazing films that are being made. And then ultimately, when you do talk to people, like nobody in those kind of roles, let's say, in some ways, it's a thankless job being that type of producer, because nobody says, very few people want to make bad work. Everybody wants to make good work. And it's neither one thing or the other. It's not like, well, the market is always wrong or the state is always right. It's some people make a great piece of work and then they make a rubbish piece of work. And I think it's
like the humanity of it.
Yeah. And you're in the mix, you're in the ocean where everybody else, trying not to drown.
Yeah, exactly. So then current-wise projects for you, you're writing, of course, but is there also elements of producing there or?
It's a bit of both. Doing some TV stuff, have movie scripts, producing something else,
Mm.
and then have and then like maybe there's 5 or 6 other projects that are in different stages of
Right.
development. So you don't know if they'll get made or not.
And are they things that are exciting you, like taking over your mind, passion projects maybe, or?
I think it's on any particular day. So I had a meeting today about a film script that I'm involved in. There's an actress called Ella Lily Hyland who's is acting in something I've written that's coming out on BBC and Ritchie called Tall Tales of Murder, and she's kind of a wonderful actress, but she's also a wonderful writer. And so something else that I'm working with my friend who directed Love Hate, David Caffrey, and it's based on the Witness, a podcast and a book about this Ireland's youngest ever person, witness protection. And then I'm just writing a pilot for something else that I'm very excited about because I had a breakthrough I was working till 2 or 3 in the morning.
Oh, great.
And so I'm kind of, so that's the thing. I guess whatever I'm working on right this minute. So I'm excited to get back to that tomorrow.
Great.
Sometimes I wish that you don't have the breakthrough late at night. I'd like to have a more kind of 9 to 5 thing where I often find suddenly it's 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night, and it's like suddenly 2 o'clock, and you keep working because you are like surfing the wave, and then that has a knock-on effect. So then the following night it'll be 3, and then the following night it'll be 4,
Right.
and then you'll kind of keep working until you get it done, and then you're.
And what does that look like when you're working? Is that just you with a script document, or are you up and moving around, or?
No, I mean I'm at I'm at the computer. I'm working on that one. It's on this particular thing. I know what I'm doing. I have a clear sense of it, and I'm looking for these other elements, and I was looking for, I suppose it's looking for some magic thing. You're looking
Right.
for something, and I had done a lot of work on it previously, and so it's something I'm coming back to, and I mean, each project has its own separate energy, but what I find is, and I go back to like writing for the play for the first time. Sometimes I find it quite useful to read. Read screenplays at the same time, or be thinking about screenplays and go, I remember that one. What did they do there? And what's kind of brilliant now is that you can pretty much access any screenplay you want, but your question will be, you'll be looking at structurally, it'll be a structural thing. So so I tend to, or I will find I'll kind of watch something in a brain dead kind of way, and again, like I was talking to somebody today about it, was you watch something that you've seen before, and you can find interesting. It doesn't always have to be the best film ever. Sometimes it really helps to be watching something that's you've seen a few times before, is okay, not bad, and then you're kind of you're coming away from the computer, but actually your unconscious mind is working on it at the same time.
Right.
So so there's that's
I do the exact same thing when I sort of run into a block on something I'm working on. I think it's even just to gather inspiration.
Yep.
Like I'll go back and consume things again, whether it be films or books or scripts, like any art, I guess, which I know holds the potential to inspire me. And I think it's like always been that kind of cycle where it's like I'll consume art that inspires me to create something, and then in order to help me make that thing, I go back and consume more stuff.
I think that's a great example. I was talking to somebody who worked with Tarantino and said like he has a thing where on set he doesn't let mobile phones. So there's a great I think it's quite fantastic to be able to work in that medium.
Yeah.
And it's really important. Well, for me, just to keep that sense of wonder.
Yeah.
The kind of almost like a childish wonder that there's issues come up all the time, but no matter what you do, there's always going to be something.
Yeah.
But it is like
Playing still.
going to the circus, having an adventure, having fun. And I do think like everything you do, I think every time you do something, you think it's good, and then you go, it's not so good, or you look back and you go, oh, I could have done that better, or maybe, and you look at, so I look at, you're talking about Paul Thomas Anderson there, and I was thinking about the Battle of Algiers. This is the most extraordinary film, and I remember like seeing that for the first time or seeing it a few times. No matter how many times I watch it, I look at it and go, how do they make that so good? It
Yeah.
feels like
A
a documentary
Yeah.
and like what it says at that particular time. And how do they do it? I don't understand. How do they make it? I can't. Lots of things you can see how films or TV shows are made, and you can recognize the professionalism of them. On that one, I think for me, I would, there's a wonder about really great work. And at the back of your mind, you're always saying, is it possible? So anytime you try and embark on something, is it possible to do something really good?
Mm.
And it's not. You know, you don't quite step up, or it doesn't quite work out, or what reason. And then sometimes you're half aligned, or
Right.
sometimes the planet's somewhat aligned that you're nearly there. But I think you're always looking for, you're always, I think anybody in the business, you're in it because you're inspired by some of the great stuff you've seen. And
Yeah.
you wonder, um, is it possible? And it kind of is. And I think now, especially, with camera phones and everything else, and I think, you look at what's his name, the guy, Anora.
Right. Oh, Sean Baker.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the kind of model you want to be at, where it's the guy's just making the kind of films he wants to make, just with a unique take and for not much money, so he doesn't.
Yeah. But you're right. I mean, every time I approach making anything, I always look for at least some small part of it to be like a magic trick, you know? I
Yeah,
think that's what engages me. And I think also like leaving some mystery obviously forces people to lean in more.
it's like kind of crazy in this day and age. You can access mostly anything. You can find out how a film was made. You can see behind the scenes. You can see how they did special effects. You look at even like Roger Deakins. He's got a podcast. You can see, talk to other cinematographers.
Yeah.
You can look and see what this is his philosophy. This is how he achieves certain things. This is where he's going for. And so you're surrounded by all this kind of information.
Mm.
And what you do find with all the kind of greats is, they are all really professional, and they all are really trying to stay engaged and inspired and do good work.
Yeah. It's something younger me would just obsess over for hours, going through B-roll on YouTube and, special features on DVDs and trying to catch a glimpse of like a wire pull or a director working on set. But now I think like that side of things has been so blown up because of social media and media just being 24/7 that it does feel a bit less like magical to get that insight or
Yeah.
something. Like, even though it's a great thing to learn, it feels sort of like you're being choked by behind the scenes featurettes all the time. And so, like, I'm wondering more and more now that we can show everything, like, or should we just leave that mystery of the process sort of untouched for the most part?
I think I don't like to watch trailers, so I like to have that cinema experience.
Yeah.
And I like to, yeah, I don't like to read reviews, look at trailers. I like to go in. You often, it's hard to so you go in and have this experience, and if you can, it's like amazing. And then in terms of all the stuff that's around, it's pretty great at the same time in this day and age. So you've got, like with Ireland, you've got this, with the Section 481, you've got this huge wealth of, going back, 20, 30 years of wealth and experience in
Yeah.
terms of just crews, right? And you've got like really incredible actors coming out of places like the Lear, And I've talked to a few people. So well, how come you're coming out and you're like fully formed, and I don't know what the setup they have there, but they do like a foundation course, and they do 3 years, and then I think they put on something like 6 almost professional productions a year, and that's kind of fairly extraordinary. And then you've got Dunleary, IDT. If you look, I don't know, the facilities are phenomenal down there. And but you can be at home in your bedroom, and you can self-educate. You can look at the movies. You can look at YouTube clips about the behind the scenes. So I think it's extraordinary to have that access.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, that's the other thing too. The self-education part of it for me has always been huge. But I think like with these conversations, the difference of actually sitting down with other people in person to discuss something has been truly like a great new sort of less isolated or media driven way to educate myself.
I think as well, like most people will meet, talk, and answer questions. And I remember I loved The West Wing. Like it's incredible craft of screenwriting, how he introduced characters. And the pilot episode of The West Wing it's really incredibly well crafted. It's and I'd read it a few times. And anyway, there's in one of the seasons, Martin Sheen puts on his jacket in a weird way, and you kind of notice this, and you don't think anything. And then at one point, they have a section where they go back to when he was in school, and so the cut is Martin Sheen, President Bartlett, puts on his jacket in a weird way, and in the turn they cut back to the 18-year-old kid in school who's doing the same thing. And I was looking at this going, wow, that's really smart.
Yeah.
I hadn't seen that, and he had such a unique way of doing it. And then I was I ended up getting invited to this screening of it was a Jim Sheridan film, and it was in Denzil Lane. It's not like the cinema that's not there anymore, and Martin Sheen was in town. I wanted to ask him this question, so I said, how did that work? And he goes, oh, it's really simple. He said, I broke my arm. So I broke my left arm years ago, and it's never got it fixed. So I'm trying to put this over my head, and I've never been able to do this. So I have to put my jacket on in this weird way. And he said, and Aaron Sorkin noticed this and
put it in.
Put it in.
Wow.
So I think if you appreciate the craft,
you have the kind of mind that's geared towards that medium at all times. So if you see something like that, you're just ready to grab it and use it.
Like, you're looking for it, and you have an appreciation of like, oh, that's I admire that. That's smart, and it's all that textural stuff that's truthful, or it's not film copying another film,
Right. It's always the intricacies that makes anything feel real, I guess. Which I think is a great insight for creating anything, like beyond just screenwriting. It kind of applies to so much more. And before we conclude, I think, is there anything else in that kind of vein that comes to mind? Maybe insights that you've picked up along the way that maybe we haven't really touched on yet?
I think there's always issues to try and get stuff made or not made, and that's part of it, and it's also part of the fun. If it was handed to you on a plate, it might be too easy. So it's fun to hustle, and it's part of it. And if you're hustling with like-minded people, you're on an adventure together. And I think it's about ultimately looking at stuff that you like. And it's, again, I go back to that idea of the circus. It's great adventure, and it's a lot of fun. And to be like surfing in your imagination is a great place to be. And it's just really important to protect it, to not be cynical, be like a kid playing, and be open to the collective energy around you, because I think that it doesn't happen without that collective energy.